Struggling to differentiate your SaaS product in a very crowded market? Tired of losing sales cycles and losing deals to competitors? In this episode of Go-to-Market Lab, value selling expert Jason McKarge, Vice President of Visualize, will show us how this proven framework will work in your business. You will discover how to pinpoint your customers' biggest pain points, communicate value effectively, ask intelligent questions, and build trust and close deals efficiently. If you're ready to accelerate your SaaS company growth and stop leaving money on the table in every deal, this is the must-watch episode. This is the Go-to-Market Lab. Thanks for joining us today. Hello. Thank you again for joining another episode of the Go-to-Market Lab. I know it's been a minute, so I'll call this the start of season 2. We have spent a lot of time on this lab talking about different aspects of go-to-market. And as many of you have heard me speak about, go-to-market in my mind is the three-legged stool of three things that have come together in a perfect union, is the balance of product, of marketing, and then to me, the piece de resistance is the sales execution to maximize the product market fit and how you're able to package that for your customers. But that being said, I think my guest might agree with me that when I tell people who, I might meet, friends not in the industry, that I do sales, I've done sales for a living, there's a little bit of a stink face. And I can just see the image crossing across their mind in terms of the car salesman and what that might be. And I think that one of my mantras and soapboxes I go on often is that sales as a profession is very similar to a physician or an engineer or someone or a specialist, in that you really have to work on your craft. And that's actually a part of why I call this the go-to-market lab, because it is a mixture of a bit of finesse and art, but certainly of science. And so my guest today, absolutely helped, I know, myself and my past teams with the science part of sales. So for all of you listening, sales is not just being able to talk well to somebody and be able to, go to dinners and happy hours and be able to relate to people. There is a method of the madness. There is a methodology to running sales calls, or there is a methodology to running deals. And especially in today's day and age, when we all have so little time, it's even more important to make sure you're so specific and succinct, so that just like in surgery, it's better to have your surgeon who can get the job done in 30 minutes than 4 hours. We really have to do the best we can as sellers in a shortened period of time nowadays. And that's really why I'm a big advocate, and have been for a long time, of value selling. So I brought in today, without much further ado, I brought in today my friend and guest, Jason McKarge. He's a VP at Visualize who focuses on value selling. He's got a long history, not just as an expert trainer of not only executives, sales managers, but sales reps at all different stages in their career, but also has long time been an operator, held a bag, as well as managed sales teams. And so he's a great person, not only because he teaches this methodology that I so love as a full-time gig, but he also is someone that I bounce off ideas when I was stuck in deals, or might have had a management challenge in terms of being able to elevate my managers to maximize their sales reps, et cetera. So without any delay, Jason, would love you to kind of jump in and maybe just add a little bit more color and spice to the bio I just gave to you, because I know that what I just said certainly does not do it justice.
Well, I appreciate that. And thanks for having me, Kathleen. So I agree with a lot of what you said about sales. And believe me, I never thought I would be in sales. I mean, my dad was a skilled trades, and mom stayed at home, and all my neighbors were auto workers. So sales was a very foreign concept. But how I originally got involved was with a computer science degree. I was a programmer, and then I got a chance to be an SC, and there's a little bit more of that story that's not important, but that was my first introduction really into sales. When different companies would come in to pitch to us, then I got that exposure from that side of the table. And I was just very intrigued by it. And with a computer science degree, I was very drawn to process. And you kind of intimated that. And so the process of sales is what intrigued me. And then I had a chance to go into sales and sales leadership, and got into this opportunity to do sort of the enablement and the training part through a former boss of mine that said, "I'd love for you to build an onboarding program." And I said, "That's cool. I don't know how to do that." So figured that out and had the opportunity then to facilitate and lead these training programs. And so I'm very blessed in the last, I don't know, 7, 8 years, I've been able to make this the full-time part of my career.
Absolutely. And we all have benefited from it. I know you can't share the companies in which you have been able to be a part of their enablement journey on value selling, but it's certainly an impressive list of not just big, but also rapidly growing and small but nimble too as well. So as if you're listening, you might have picked up Jason actually can talk for a long time. And so I just, realized I've almost already gotten off script. So let me take this, zoom out the aperture here. Let's just set the groundwork for today's episode for all of you guys on the call listening or watching us on YouTube. So in this podcast, we're going to break down the many different topics we can and distill into four main listening points or four main topics for today. And what we're going to go through is first, we're going to go through really what is the key selling process, but most importantly, from a founder led sales motion. Jason, as we've talked, many of our listeners on the call are in the early stages of growing their tech B2B startups. And so the founders are very much involved with the process. But ultimately, at some point, there's a one rep, a two rep, maybe a head of sales, et cetera. But curious to, based on your experience, since you've led big and small, if maybe for those in the call who are at that stage or just now pivoting into a sales team stage, kind of compare and contrast maybe what skills you need to amplify, tune up, or maybe tune down or gain new skills to be order to make that leap from I'm doing the deals into now I've got to activate a team doing the deals. So that will be the first thing we're going to go through on the call. The second, I want to give for the listeners shape around this assumed definition of what selling is today. And, spoiler alert for the title of the training that Jason runs and what I've talked about in all of my podcasts is the concept of value-based selling and why is that effective in today's environment. There's many different sales philosophies out there, sales methodologies. They all have a lot of similarities, but why is it that we focus on value selling today and in this aggressive technologically advanced and also competitive market? And then we're going to round out the second part of this podcast with really getting Jason's lens, being that he has exposure to being being able to see from the back scenes, if you will, what are actually the mistakes that sellers make, not only as being a former manager and seller himself, but through the lens of being on the coaching side for the companies and the clients that he helps. So what is really give us kind of your late night Letterman top five, so to speak. And then on the flip side, what are these most common things that you find across the board that if a person can level up on these skills, they will make them exponentially better sellers if there's a common line in that too as well. So that is our agenda for today. We're just going to jump right into it. So first, let's talk about Jason. So when you and I met, we're at a uber large behemoth software company. You and I engaged with a medium-sized software company. And Jason, as we've talked about, clients today I work with are more in the seed series A stage, very different. But I'm just curious to get your professional opinion of what that looks like. Maybe compare and contrast that early stage motion into maybe, so let's just call it for those on the call to get it, make sure we're all talking the same page. You've got a team of 20, the founders in every sale, you're still struggling to get maybe 1 or 2 million ARR. And so now you're starting with a team, you've surpassed 5 million ARR, you're going out to or stretching all the way to maybe 30, 35 million ARR, kind of in that round. So curious if you could lay that out for us.
Yeah, I think what I've seen successful, Kathleen, is, and I think part of the transition, so I'll hold that for a second. Part of the transition from founder-led sales, because they obviously have the passion and the intellect and the understanding of the product, capabilities, et cetera. but that doesn't scale long term. And so if you're going to go from 20 or 10 to 35 million ARR, something like that, now we got to scale. And so how do we turn those sellers into reflections of the founder, both in understanding and then enthusiasm? And I think where the connective tissue is our capabilities, whatever that product or solution platform is, what do those capabilities solve for the customer? And I believe that's the connective tissue. And so sellers need to get really good, really quickly at what are the problems we solve uniquely or better than alternatives in the market, and making that connection, helping the customer understand that connection or that linkage. That's the acceleration point, because we can all talk about, well, presumably, we can all talk about features, functions, capabilities, that kind of thing. But it's really getting super crystal clear on what are those problems that we solve with this platform solution, et cetera. What do we solve uniquely or better? That's the secret sauce.
I want to just double click on that in a second, because I've worked with enough founders or those at the end of the day just passionate about the technology in which they sell, that the statements that they make in their minds are value statements. But in value selling definition, so to speak, or for any executive on the other side of that conversation, they're not coming out that way. They're coming out as feature function. So could you give us a quick example of a statement? Here's a statement that might be common for a technical specialist or technical seller to be able to say, and then translate that into how that might be reframed as a value statement, just so everyone on this call early on this podcast session can understand what we mean by value.
Yeah, you bet. And so value can be viewed and translated different ways. The way we like to think about it is it's about the outcome of solving that issue or that problem. And so our capabilities only matter to the customer if they solve a problem, right? I think we have
Okay.
agreement generally on that. And so can we identify the problems that we solve? And then what's the outcome? What's the KPI or the success metric of solving that issue? Because if there's no value associated, the problem's not worth solving. And so we all sort of know that inherently. But when we talk features, it has to be in the context of the problem solved. And what are the needles we move positively by solving that issue?
Okay, I'm going to keep pressing a little bit more to crystallize it. So you coach me for a second. So I'm going to pretend to make I'm going to make a statement that I might say on a call and give feedback of, buzzer or ding, correct. This was a value statement. So I might say, this functionality will drive workflow to be able to make to complete your assessment process faster.
Right. And so what's the root cause of the problem that we'll be addressing with that capability?
Okay, so you're saying that's not a value statement in and of itself. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay, so if I reframe that to say our solution set enables you to drive more efficiencies in your process in order to be able to get to your product release faster, that is aligned with this critical mission of your company, your new AI release.
Yeah, there you go. It's about time to market in that statement. And if we can even put evidence behind that time to market metric, now we've really got a value state.
Okay. So if I'm able to say, we believe based on our past discussions and our analysis that our solution set can reduce your engineering process workflow by 65%, and therefore pulling your timeline closer to meet your newest AI release within the next month rather than 6 months out.
Now we're talking.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
See, for everyone on the call, I did listen in the 4 or 5 value selling trainings that I got. So hopefully that did translate. So, okay. All right, here we go. We're going back on task now. So, okay, so there's a lot of selling methodologies out there. I meet a lot of CROs, interview and talk to a lot of reps, and they say, "Oh, I've taken Sandler. I've taken, I'm a big fan of MedPick. I've done force management." Maybe just compare and contrast why we talk about this approach of really translating value and how that might be different from from these other methodologies out there? And, we don't have to name names, but just what makes value selling and that approach unique.
Yeah, and I've been through, as a student, Kathleen, I've been through half dozen or more of these different methodologies, as I progressed through my career. The reason I was drawn most to value selling is it's simple. It's not always easy, but it's simple, and that makes it adoptable. And so value selling doesn't ask a seller to do anything they shouldn't already be doing. They don't always do them, but nothing that they shouldn't be doing. And so I believe that's why I was personally drawn to value selling, and why we've had successes with some of the organizations that you sort of intimated. I think the other thing is, when we talk about value selling, it's about orienting to the other side of the table. It doesn't matter what we do until we understand the context of what that individual needs to achieve. What are the headwinds they're facing? How do they want to solve it? And how are you going to measure success of this thing? And so, to oversimplify on purpose, value selling allows us to quickly orient to the other side of the table. And because of its simplicity, it's adopted.
The thing that, to me, what you said made me think about, I'm a big fan of Charles Duhigg and his books, and the book that he released last year was Super Communicators. It's not a selling book. It is a book to help you communicate better with your partner, with your children, with your coworkers, etc. But really what you just said is being able to not have a one-way conversation, have a two-way conversation. I think so many of times, whether you're a founder or a seller, we're on this call and there's a sense of urgency because you need a deal to meet your quota, to be able to complete the raise that you're trying to get to. But that really then translates almost in the conversation that you're so myopically focused on getting your agenda across that you're not listening to their side. So I think at the end, to me, it is also a very natural concept to think about. Yeah, people want to talk to people who are able to listen and have empathy for where they're at and are truly thinking about how to solve their problem, not to do the reverse, right? On how to figure out how to solve, to put their scenario and their problems to match what they're offering, right? It's more of a flip side, is the way I think about it.
Yeah, we throw around the term trusted advisor, but really what that boils down to is somebody that is partnering with you to help you achieve your goals. And, quota and raising capital, all of that is a factor. But at the end of the day, people like to buy. Nobody wants to be sold. Yeah, so stop selling and start helping, right? And the only way we can really understand the other side of the table, and if we can help, is to ask really good questions emphatically to understand what they're up against.
So that's a good segue into this next section that we wanted to discuss around really what are the maybe misconceptions about selling in a B2B context. And I'll just say for all those in the call, some might argue this, but I would say, when you're selling to a $1 billion company or a $500 million company, you're gonna go through the same machinations as a Fortune 10. It may be a little bit more complex with more stakeholder processes, procurement processes, but the concepts of what you've got to do in B2B selling is the same. So just to make sure those on the call who might be technical founders are listening, it's like, oh, well, they're talking about big enterprise Fortune 500 sales. They're not talking about the mid-market company I'm going after, which is a lot of startups ICP because they're faster deals to get, quote unquote. Um, but I would contend with that. So just can you comment on what you feel like in today's marketplace? What you think once a human being, not a bot, an AI bot, a human being is engaged in the sales process in a B2B sale, what does that actually what do people think it means? And what do you feel like it should mean?
One thing that's changed, and you and I talked about this previously, Kathleen, is the amount of information available, both for sellers, but also for the buyers. Where I think sellers can be most effective now is you're going to have presumably less interactions for a shorter amount of time because your buyers are way more educated than they could be 10, 15 years ago. so are we though, in terms of their business and that kind of thing. So presumably you're going to have less interactions in shorter time. So doesn't that mean we have to be super effective and efficient and maybe less opportunities to connect with the buyer?
So what you made me think about in saying that is, to your point, I can nowadays, it used to be an hour, but nowadays it's 5 minutes where I can run my custom chat GPT prompt and be able to prep for a call with a new contact, a new CEO, sales founder, or founder who I've never spoken to before. And I have to quickly process that information, but it's still prep time at the end of the day. Now, if I was prospecting, that's a lot of muscle to put into 500, 1,000 leads, right? To be able to show up that way. And obviously, don't get me started. There's really amazing tools who can do that at scale. Not perfect, but good enough, to get by. So maybe what I think you're also alluding to is when we have that first sales call, it's actually, and that's the wrong terminology. When we have the first call with a new contact, who at that point is not a lead, not a, marketers on the call for not a MQL, not a marketing qualified lead at that point, not even a sales qualified lead. You got to probably quickly qualify more efficiently. So therefore, to your point, Jason, you're going to put in some muscle into more preparation, being able to be more effective on calls. Is that so? But I think that's the conundrum for our listeners is they're in environments, Jason, where they're wearing 18 hats depending on the day. So it's not that they don't want to, but it's very hard to prep for a first call. So what advice would you give kind of in that scenario of how do you apply being this trusted advisor at, minute one on a call, but yet you're trying to build a relationship, but yet in 30 minutes, you're also trying to hopefully plant some seeds to maybe develop that into a lead. Tell me about how quote unquote, what's quote unquote selling looks like in that scenario.
And when we say selling, it's really more about helping, but you have to establish, to your point, some level of trust and rapport, right? At no point can it be an interrogation because nobody wants that. And that's not really productive. So, one of the things that we talk a lot about is using stories of success in order to get someone to lean in because people love storytelling, right? And so that's not make up stuff. That is real life where we've helped another organization. And and to get that little bit of rapport and trust, you'll learn more over time, hopefully. But and then having really smart, well-prepared questions, whether or not that's 5 minutes or 55 minutes of prep, that's kind of individual. But technology has allowed us to prepare so much quicker now. And it's about intelligent questions, trying to understand the other side of the table. That to me is selling. And that's what the really good folks, the really successful ones do.
Again, for the listeners, let's try to crystallize this. So I'm going to say a question and pretending you and I are on our first call. And let's just say I represent, and this is not a marketing promotion plug, but let's say I represent, um, Atlassian, right? They make Jira, again, no relationship whatsoever. Not a weird plug, but so let's say that. And what I'm asking, so I'm the sales rep for Atlassian, and you're a CRO, and I might say to you, "Hey, Jason, so I'm curious. You looked at the website. It seems like we have an interest. You said contact us. You've got some interest. What are I'm curious? What are you looking to achieve? Today and learning about Atlassian. How might you then now reframe that into a quote unquote intelligent question of what you just required? How might we say that or ask that question differently?
When we teach value selling, we say never wing it. Wing it is plan B. Prep is plan A, but we'll try it for now. I'll wing it.
I know. For those you don't call it, Jason is his steam's coming out of his ears because he loves to be prepped, and I just totally threw a
No, that's cool.
there 180 at
Yeah, it's not like I didn't expect that. But is there a way to lead into that question with a bit of a value statement, Kathleen? Um, to kind of earn the right to ask that question in the first place, presuming that you haven't spoken to that person previous. Like we were able to help another organization very similar to you, and this is kind of the outcome that they saw. And I don't know if it's the same kind of challenge with you, but I'd love to understand, kind of what are your priorities? What are you hoping to achieve this year? So a little bit of value for the listener in addition to asking a really solid question.
Yeah, I like that because what you can demonstrate in that question, I like, 2 for 1, 3 for ones. And so to me, what you're able to achieve and the way that you frame that question is number 1, I did my homework because the way you're asking it assumes that you know what they do for a living. Number 2, you're kind of putting out a little bit of an empathetic statement to say, hey, just in case these are problems that you might have, these are things that we see. It's very normal, right? You might disarm that person. And then 3, you're obviously opening with a question in which that person can then give you a deeper, more specific answer rather than, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" Well, I mean, I have a million problems. Which one do you want to talk about today? So
Yeah,
you're kind of trying
exactly.
to direct them into a very focused, and that's kind of in my mind when I think about kind of a level 2, 3 question. There's level 1 questions, which is, "Oh, how are you? How was your weekend?" It's like a level 1 easy no-brainer question. But the second level question would be, "Oh, I saw that it rained cats and dogs this weekend, and you guys, I know your kids are playing baseball. Did you get all your games canceled?" Right? That shows that I know what that person is. I'm putting 1 and 2 together, and I'm able then to maybe get, "Oh, yeah, it absolutely rained." I'm gonna get some emotion with that, but also get another answer of what they really did for that weekend, just as a soft result. Maybe that's a analogy I'm just using because it literally poured this morning, and our kids have soccer tournaments this weekend, which will probably mean that it get canceled. But anyways, back on task. Okay, so that was very helpful. Okay, so let's move into give us your top figure number 3, 4, 5 common mistakes you see on a sales call. And maybe let's frame this for common mistakes. So assume that you've had an initial call for 30 minutes and you've broken bread, so to speak. You've got a little bit of rapport. You only showed a little bit, talked a little bit about the product or that what you're trying to achieve for problem solving. And that person, "Yeah, you know what? I'll bring in a couple people on my team. This sounds interesting. Let's have a full hour call and demonstration." In that context, what would you say are the top mistakes that you see, whether it's in role play or what you might hear behind closed doors as your managers are seeking your opinions on how to coach a particular situation and give feedback?
So I don't know, as I think about the list, I don't know how long or short it would be. I believe that one of the mistakes that folks make, we've made it too, is to assume. So if you got some level of information, then our tendency is to fill in gaps and assume some other things. Man, that's a big mistake. Because if you misalign on one critical area, rapport's out the window for the most part. And so you just got to be careful with assuming, which is why we can always ask questions. Say that second meeting in that sort of scenario, Kathleen. In the second meeting, you don't have to just talk, keeping in mind that we never learn anything while talking. So you can ask questions during that time and make it conversational. So I think that's a mistake folks make. Probably selling past the close is a very when folks get it, stop talking,
Yeah,
and move
right.
on. And I think, a lot of us have that tendency too. Yeah, well, let me tell you about it, this way and that way. And it's like, no, they get it. Leave them alone. So I think that's maybe another key mistake folks make.
Well, what's interesting is I think the common thread that ran through all 3 of those is too much talking.
Yeah.
My favorite story is I may have said this in another podcast, but it's so good, I'll say it again. So, you and I had just done with my team, we had just done a manager's value selling. So, I was, it's very much like, "I'm gonna do this." I'll admit I don't do it every time, but that day, as I did my prep, done my value prompt ready to go, and my role on the call was, I was VP of sales at the time, was my rep was struggling with creating this relationship with the executive and even just being able to lure that person on a call. And so we had set up a call. It was very quick, 30 minutes. They were a new customer, in order for me to get alignment and in that case, really get feedback and hear their voice as to what's going well and what's not. The problem was in this case, again, we hadn't met this person and we just didn't have a lot of insight. That was the reason why we needed this call. And so I just didn't have a lot of to go by. I didn't know what was working and what I could ask about to the level I typically like to know before a call. And so I was like, all right, I'll just go back to value selling. And I asked 3 questions. And I'd like to say they're intelligent questions because I knew what their business was and I knew customers like them that we had had and what they were going through. So I asked 3 questions on this 30-minute call. It's literally all that I did. And after the call, so I got my objective met, which was I was able to get to the root cause of some of their opinions, or I was start really able to find that out. But I was like, "Oh, it's okay." I was like, "We made our objective." I'm not sure if I did a lot of for relationship per se, but we were able to get through it. And after the call, Jason, the rep, got a phone call from his champion, his person on the call, the manager, and was like, "Oh, they were just telling me how that was the best vendor call they've had in 6 months. That was so amazing." And I was just so confused. I was like, I didn't really say anything. They just talked. So I think we also have to remember people think things are great when they just keep talking.
Yeah,
So
and technology like Gong, I don't know if I can name specifically, but has given us insight into a lot of that data and what's effective and how much we're talking in
yes.
contrast to the other side. Um, so that's some nice visibility into maybe how much we talk.
Oh, yes. Oh, man, I use several note takers, but the one that I'm thinking of, Fathom, it has a big yellow block, Jason. It says, "You've just had a monologue. You're in a monologue," and it tells you it has, like, a running timer, and it puts it in your face, and it's the most unnerving thing. I was like, "Man, I really needed this as a sales rep. I probably could have done a much better job if this gave me this yellow alert." All right, so on the flip side, what would you say are look, we all know, especially with things related to communication and conversations, a lot of us do wing it because we've had enough conversations where we probably can and not sound completely off. Um, but if we're gonna make calls effective, what would you say are if you could just focus on 2 things and just really try to do those 2 things really, really well, are complete game changers and being able to elevate how you interact as a person who's a, revenue generator at a company?
Yeah, well, I don't have any magic bullets. I know you wouldn't expect any, but it's about preparation. We've got to do that. And technology has made it so much easier now. I used to spend an hour or 2 hours preparing for a conversation that can take 4 minutes now, or 2 minutes, or 30 seconds. So the technology has allowed us to be better prepared. Shame on you for not doing that part. And then we kind of just talked about it. It's listening. It's asking follow-up questions. It's understanding the other side of the table because we're not important yet. We haven't made that connection yet because we don't understand enough of the other side of the table. So I think it's preparation, asking questions, listening. And I know that's pretty cliche, but there's still some up-leveling opportunity for a lot of folks.
Yeah, my one of my favorite people in the world who's a CRO herself, Beth Strobel, I always remember we were talking about a certain situation. She said, I realized I had to go slow to go fast. And I think we feel, listen, I'm the culprit of this, trying to bounce from one thing to another. And, I know enough where I can wing it. But I do have to block that time at the beginning of the day where I look through my schedule and I really get my mindset on prep. And to your point, Jason, I've gotten pretty efficient with GPT and Claude and a couple others where I can do it. I can do that in half the time, a third of the time. I still do it. And I think that what that results in is a better mindset on the call that in my mind, the best sellers are really just curious. Like they like to learn about people, they like to learn about companies. And if that is really the MO, I think when you do actually prep, in my mind, it kind of gets my mind into that state where I'm like playing detective. I'm trying to problem solve. Like my kids love this who, what, where, why, or something. It's a Tinkercast podcast that they play detective and go back in time. And I just think it's so interesting because I've always thought about and sailing as like you're a detective trying to uncover, and you're also trying to figure out how to lay down your process so that you can uncover the most as you go along the way to get to quote unquote the answer, which is the sale. So I wonder what you think about that because I wonder if the key to all of this might be, I put that out there. I think for some people I've mentored over the years, it was actually more of a mindset shift. And once they had that shift, kind of everything followed. It wasn't hard to prep because you realize you didn't know so much. Or maybe you thought you knew, but you didn't know the second or third level answer, right? You knew the surface level answer, but the second and third, you kind of assume that you didn't know that.
That's right. It goes back to not assuming. And
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
back to preparation. Yeah. I do believe part of it's a mindset. And I think part of the problem that we have in sales organizations, generally speaking, there's exceptions, but generally speaking, is we hire a rep or two or 200 and we teach them all about us. Here's all the product capabilities, the beauty and benefit, and what it does for the customers. And it's all amazing. Now go sell it. And so, what are folks going to tend to and trend to talking about? Everything we told them, which is all about our stuff. And so, the mindset changes, all of that could be helpful, but we don't know yet because we haven't understood if they have challenges, problems, goals that we can help them address. So, we're not here to sell, we're here to help.
Yeah. So just to recap here, I think we cover a lot of juice, and of course we're at time, but we may have to have you come in for an encore at some point, Jason, and really get through. I'd love to do maybe on this podcast a bit of like a live prep session for a call and actually do a role play for a call. But we cover on this call the shift in terms of scale, the shift in terms of being able to go from a founder sale to a team sell, and the importance of being able to ask questions, not only ask questions to look for the true problems, to find the value that you can bring to solve those problems, but also to communicate as tech founders. Many of our listeners, Jason, are B2B tech founders, being able to make sure that you can communicate with value statements rather than feature function. We've talked about that in other episodes as well, so it deserves to be said again. But also too, I think really what you shared is just the simplicity of a seller today has to be able to just want to understand the other side in a deeper way. And in order to do that, you've got to ask deep and efficient and intelligent questions. But to me, what, you know, I probably will wrap that all in a bow and say, I think what it comes to is, the definition of a salesperson, quote unquote, today has to be the person who is able to uncover the true problems, the needle mover problems, the roadblocking problems in an organization, and be able to help the customer understand how there is a match of what you can provide to actually help to solve those problems. And if you can do that in a way that's better than your competitor, I do think that one of your competitive advantages is actually the team who is able to have that live human interaction in that sales process, an enterprise sales process, to be able to do that. So just to wrap up, Jason, so I do this thing called rapid fire, so we'll keep this short and brief. So again, yet another thing that you weren't prepared for, so just to have fun. So if you had 4 hours of you can do anything in the world time, what would you spend that time doing?
Oh, wow. Probably a beach under an umbrella if you notice my skin tone is lacking. So, not in direct sunlight, probably.
Now, would you be sleeping? Would you be listening to music, reading a book? What would you be doing?
I love to read on the beach. Listening to
Yeah.
music's good too. Hanging out with my kids who are adults now, but even throwing a football around on the beach. I think that's a pretty good 4 hour block there. Maybe a cold beverage or two.
Yeah, maybe cold beverage. That definitely kind of crystallizes the whole picture for me. Okay. What is in your mind the coolest thing you were able to do with a GPT so far?
Oh, wow. Oh, here's one. So I've done a lot. I've used GBT or AI in general a lot in prepping for both our workshops, but also for sales conversations. That's been awesome. But my mom was going through some health stuff, Kathleen, and I used it by loading all of her medications and the dosages and things. And I got some really concrete, good feedback on the side effects of what she was up against in terms of her medication. So, yeah, you didn't expect that answer. I didn't expect the question. So there you go.
Oh god, I love that. I love that. My family is in healthcare, and gosh, if you're listening on the call and you have a startup that's around helping to empower the patients who unfortunately are the receiving end of doctors who are not, are not incentivized to take the time to explain the gobbledygook coming out of their mouth. Um, I just talk to me. I'm free consulting, whatever I gotta do to help your mission, 'cause that's near and dear to my heart. That's kind of amazing. I've recently took Function Lab has this thing where you pay like $500, you get all your labs, and it was really confusing, the results I got. So I hadn't thought about that. I should load it in. Maybe I'm kinda scared of what it's gonna say, but I should load that in and see what it
Right.
is.
You could try it. I know that that's a sidebar, but I found that really, really cool.
Yeah. All right. The last rapid fire question is, if you could do one thing differently in your career, one thing, what would it be?
Gosh, you know what? It's tough because I believe I'm where I'm supposed to be in terms of the role now. I think one of the lessons that I learned that really sticks out is as a sales leader, cutting bait sooner on folks that weren't working out. So I don't know if that's a popular opinion or not, but because when you're a leader, whether it's sales leader or otherwise, your job in part is to coach and mentor the folks under you, right? And so I took that part real serious. But in certain cases, I should have ended that quicker. That was that was a mistake I made.
Yeah, man. Yeah. You and I have had many hours of conversations where I'm coming to you with that same problem. Listen, I think hiring in any job is the hardest thing. There's only so much you can ascertain in 2 to 3 hours of meeting somebody to see if they're gonna be a day-to-day fit for maybe ideally, a career-long fit for your team, and I don't know, if there's AI that can help to do that better, that's awesome, but it's really hard. I know you love baseball, hence the pitchers behind you, but, my batting average is more like a baseball batting average, definitely not like a free throw percentage
Yeah, right.
average, or at least a good free throw shooter average.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. At least historically, I was. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool. Well, I really appreciate the time today for all of you on the call. I love, love, love feedback, even if it's, I didn't like this. Jason would take that too as well. So if you liked the content, or at least you want to hear more, be sure to subscribe. It does help to spread the message so we keep bringing on some interesting guests who might listen and say, "Hey, I'd love to be able to share what my expertise is on your podcast." So that's how I've actually gotten a few of my guests. It's been really cool to do that way. So, like whatever medium you're listening to or watching this on, leave comments. If you are a little gun shy to leave comments, sometimes I do, and I get freaked out because I realize the whole world can see it. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You can send a message without it being an email or using a credit or what have you. So I'd love to hear back from you. And I know Jason would also love the same. So thank you all for listening today and joining us for the Go to Market Lab, the place where founders and revenue leaders understand better the art and the science of scaling in their go to market. Thank you guys and have a wonderful day.